Hello everybody, and welcome to today's video. It is one of the dreariest Saturdays of the summer so far, so I am hiding indoors and sorting through some of my yarn stash. While doing that, I realised that I've never actually chatted with you about my favourite knitting tools. Having been a knitter for so many years now, I have accumulated quite a lot of sort of knitting paraphernalia, and I frequently get comments from you guys asking me where I got things or how sort of certain tools are to use and knit with. So I thought it could be quite a nice idea to make a top 10 of my personal favourite knitting tools, perhaps to give you a little bit of inspiration about what could make your life a bit easier as a knitter, as well as things that just make really lovely gifts if you have other knitters in your life. Now I'm going to kick it off with something that I want to get out of the way very quickly, because most of you will know the benefits of a good interchangeable needle set. The first set I ever got is this Lykke Driftwood needle set. This is just insanely beautiful. It is a set of wooden needles, one of which I have lost and I have replaced with a copper version, but these are gorgeous, and as soon as I saw them in my first year of knitting, I thought, oh my goodness, I just have to get my hands on those. And they have been completely invaluable to my knitting journey. However, in the last sort of year or so, I have made the transition over to stainless steel needles, and these are the Hiya sharps, and that name is accurate. These really are sharp. And as I said, I'm not going to talk in too much depth about the wonders of interchangeable needles. Most of you here probably already have a good set of interchangeable needles, but if you haven't got one yet, these are quite frankly life-changing. If you're going to invest in any knitting tool, get yourself some interchangeable needles. You can easily go up and down a needle size if your tension is slightly off. Because the cables fit on all of the different heads, you can kind of put some stitches to rest or slip off certain bits. They are just invaluable. Honestly, one of my favourite knitting tools. And of these two, I really do like them equally. I tend to go for stainless steel now just because I am in love with knitting really tiny kind of fine gauge projects. However, the Driftwood ones do give me a beautiful kind of smooth and even tension. I would say that the wood actually makes my tension a little bit more even because the stitches don't slip around. However, the Hiya sharps are really awesome for very fine gauge work. Things like lace, they just kind of glide right in, there is no pulling, and yeah, it's just a bit of a different knitting experience, so I will mix them up depending on what project I want. The accessories that come in these are also really cool. You have a lot of different size cables and fasteners to kind of attach them on, so yeah, really love these are awesome. The second tool that I'm going to talk to you about is a much smaller one, and this is my trusty little gauge square. Now this is a pink elephant one from KnitPro, and you might look at it and you think it's not technically a square. No, it isn't. It is a rectangle, but it does the same job. And I particularly like this one because it's a little bit smaller than a full kind of 10 centimetre square. It also includes nifty little details, like the mouth of the elephant is technically a razor blade, which sounds a little bit scary. I mean, you know, it looks innocent, but that is super sharp. So when I don't have a little pair of scissors with me, maybe I'm travelling, this is something that I can easily pop in my bag. I can check my tension. And also it has these little gaps at the top here which you can use to measure your needle size. This is particularly handy if you have a set of needles where the numbers have rubbed off. This has happened to me on quite a few, especially the cheaper aluminium needles that I used when I had just started knitting. So before I got my interchangeable set, I had, I believe they're called pony needles, with a kind of long cable. They were really good for starting out and definitely better than straight needles. I would never use straight needles again, but they just don't really have the weight and the kind of nice feel in your hands in comparison to the sort of cooler, like slightly bougier interchangeable knitting sets. But yeah, this is a small and very sweet little tool. Many of you will have had the awful experience of perhaps not checking your gauge and realising that your top or jumper is not going to fit you properly. So invest in one of these, they make your life so easy. And yeah, this one is extra handy because it can cut any kind of loose ends. This is really cool. I've had it for years and it still looks practically new. The third object I want to chat with you about is actually one that I get the most kind of comments and questions about, and this is my knitting journal. My mum got me this from Flying Tiger. I will link it down below with all of the other objects that I'm talking about today. But this is just a really handy kind of tool to keep track of all of the yarn types that you're trying out, all of your swatching. It has so many kind of nifty features about it that just make it perfect for keeping track of knitting. It's particularly kind of designed for that, and it is just a super awesome little object. Inside, it has project pages where you can write down the name of your projects, things like size, when you started it, but it also has little envelopes where you can slip in your ball bands. I really like that because I do like to keep my ball bands just so that I can keep track of the dye lots and sort of remember all of the specifics of when I used a certain yarn. Sometimes yarns do seem to be reformulated. I mean, is reformulated the right word? I guess you guys get my drift. But yeah, sometimes yarns can actually change, I feel. There have been some bases that I've tried that seem quite different a few years later. So having the ball band and being able to kind of cross-reference is really cool and handy. And this little notebook is just a great place to store all of that information. Another one of my favourite features of this knitting journal are its pages where you can keep notes about yarn. These include kind of like little hole punch sections where you can tie sort of really tiny amounts of yarn so you can remember the feel of them even when you've used them all up. I really like to kind of keep little scraps just so that I can remember how thick they look, sort of remember the different colours. It's just really useful, and where else are you going to keep all of these little scraps of yarn if not in a tidy little journal like this one? I will link this exact one, but I will also try and find some versions on Etsy if maybe you guys don't have a Flying Tiger near you. But overall, if you can get your hands on one of these, they are just super awesome. They also make a really nice Christmas gift. As we're talking about keeping notes and trying to keep track of the yarn quantities that you've used, or maybe trying to kind of organise your knitting more generally, I have another object that I actually found very recently, which has quickly become completely invaluable to me. And these are, I believe they're called in the shop, yarn colour cards. But what I personally use these little cards for is keeping track of my swatches. So I will puncture out one of these little holes and I will attach it to the back of my swatch with information like the needle size that I use and the dye lot and sort of the tension that I achieved. That way I feel like I never forget what needle size I have used to test out different bases. I got these little cards at a shop called Sostrene Grene. I know that they have those in the UK. I used to go in them when we were still living there. And yeah, I got these in Stockholm on my holiday and I'm completely obsessed with them. You can get a whole pack of them for only, I think about €1.50. So they are super cheap, but just really useful for actually keeping track of what I have swatched up, as I am constantly forgetting the needle size that I've used. And when I'm swatching up stuff, especially if I'm thinking about designing my own patterns, it's really important that I keep track of the needle size, obviously. So yeah, super handy. I really love these, and they're just made of a nice thick card, so they do hold their shape and they look really cute too. Number 5 and 6 I am actually going to group together because they are two tools that I think should not really be separated. I did get one before the other, but it's only now that I have kind of unified them do they really work sort of perfectly. And this is my ball winder and yarn swift. The ball winder that I got here is just this plastic one. It's a KnitPro one, again, that I got off Amazon. This was relatively inexpensive, and I did use this several times before I actually got my Swift by just holding the yarn sort of taut, but it's difficult, it's a struggle. So since I got my yarn Swift for Christmas, it has just been so much smoother of an experience. When you're starting out knitting, I don't really feel like this is a tool that you really need to make the investment in. But when you kind of graduate onto slightly more bougie or particular yarn, they do tend to come in these kind of skeins. So these are almost impossible to wind without a ball winder and a yarn Swift. You can try, but you're probably going to have a really difficult time. Trust me, I know, I did it before I had these tools. But if you're a very serious knitter and you like yarn that comes in this form, these are definitely really handy tools to invest in. Overall, I'm very happy with the ball winder. I do find that that gives me really even cakes, and it's definitely one that I would purchase again. Although eventually I do have this sort of dream vision of finding a ball winder that matches my beautiful wooden Swift. I just really love the appearance of the wood. I think it looks really beautiful when you're kind of, you know, spinning it up. It just looks really like gorgeous. It makes me feel very much at peace and excited to start my next project. This particular yarn that I'm winding up here is the gorgeous Hjalholz yarn that I'm using for my Dagmar sweater, and it has definitely cut down on the time that it would have taken for me to do this if I didn't have these tools. So yeah, not an essential. If you are not knitting with yarn in this form, you probably don't need to worry about it in the beginning, but eventually you'll probably find that there will just be some yarn that you can't resist, like me, and then you'll have to bite the bullet and kind of invest in the tools. But they are really worth it, and they do make your life a lot easier. As I just covered two pretty major and slightly more expensive tools, I wanted to share another super cheapy and handy one that I got again on another kind of holiday trip. When I go on holiday, I do love to pop into yarn shops and see what they've got on offer. I find that a lot of yarn shops, especially in Scandinavia, have so many tools that are just not available here in Italy, and this was one of the ones that I picked up last year when we were in Bergen, I believe it was, that I got this. And this is the Petite knit brand stitch holders. And all these are basically kind of spaghetti-like tubes of rubber, but they come with little holes at the end, sort of like hoses, which means that you can slip them onto the end of your needle tip and you can just transfer all of your work onto one of these to put your stitches on hold. And that's 3 which are 1 meter long, and then 2 which are 1 meter 50. And they're all 2mm thick. So that works really for most of your projects, unless you're knitting on kind of absolutely minute, like 1mm needles, which I've actually never done. And I really find them to be such a cheap and real kind of quality of life improving tool. This particular bag, I believe I paid under €5 for. I think it might have been something like $3.50. So they're really affordable. Yeah, I just cannot sing their praises enough. They're very simple, but they're super useful. Now, moving away from things that I've purchased, I'm going to give you another look of my most recent addition to my knitting cupboard. This, of course, is my project bag. Many of you will recognise this because I actually sewed this up a couple of videos ago. It was such a fun and rewarding little project, and honestly, since I've made this, it has not left my side. If you are currently without a project bag, you actually don't know what you're missing until you buy or make one. I will try and link some of a similar shape. I believe that Petite Knit does, or used to do, some that look very similar to this. I will also link the pattern for this one. If you guys haven't watched my previous video, it is a pattern by Lucy Caldwell, who is a kind of sewing designer. It only took me about a day or a day and a half, and I am like not the best sewer in the world, so you can definitely make it if you have any sewing skills. And the beauty of this is that it stands completely on its own. So when your yarn is in it and you're working with it, it kind of just pulls out and flows really, really easily. Your ball doesn't spin around the table, it's all contained in here. There are also several pockets in this that I made sort of different sizes. You can make them into any size you like, but it holds everything that I need to work on a specific project. I find it particularly great when I'm going to see my parents on the train. I can kind of just grab this and I know that all of my tools are in one place and ready to go for that specific project that I'm working on. And yeah, honestly, this might be, out of everything that I'm talking about today, one of the biggest sort of improvements to my knitting, just because I'm quite a disorganized person and I do have the tendency to leave all of my knitting bits sort of all over the place and then have to spend loads of time looking for them. Now I can just sit down, I know where they all are, and I am content. You don't technically need one, but you don't know what you're missing if you don't have one. And since we're talking about yarn storage, the other thing that I have to mention, which is not particularly kind of knitting related, but I do use for my yarn, is my very big wicker yarn basket. So if I have multiple projects on the go, I will keep one in my project bag and I will keep other kind of yarn that I'm swatching up or that I have to turn into little cakes in here. It is just a super kind of soft and easy to carry basket. Again, I like the shape because the balls can't roll out of it, and this is also another one that is super affordable. This particular basket is from IKEA, but look how cute it is. It looks kind of much fancier than it is. I also believe I only paid about €7 for this basket, but it's in basically all of my videos. I love kind of the way it looks. I love that wicker texture, and it is just my favourite place to store yarn that I'm maybe not working on in my project bag, but that I am kind of interested in maybe swatching up. There's not much else I can say about it really. It is just a super cute basket. But yeah, IKEA, €7, a really, really good deal. And the last item on my list is actually a book. And this is the Japanese Knitting Stitches, the original pattern Bible by Hitomi Shida. And this is all about really luscious and beautiful kind of lacework stitches. It has anything you can imagine pattern-wise, cables, bobbles, everything is in here. And I have to say, when I am curious about how somebody achieved a particular stitch, this is where I go to kind of look it up and to kind of try and puzzle out how they did it. I don't have a very big collection of knitting books, but this is one that I could honestly recommend to anyone. It's very easy to follow and it just contains loads and loads of pages of pictures of stitches with their charts all along here. At the front there is kind of a sort of key kind of description of all of the symbols and what they mean. Yeah, it is a really, really beautiful book. When you get your hands on this, you'll probably notice quite a few of the designers that you love have probably been inspired by this, because it is just such a kind of epic work of knitting mastery. It's really, really beautifully laid out, very, very simple, and yeah, I just love it as a reference book. Sometimes I just flip through it and I see if there's anything that particularly inspires me that I want to try out. It's a great one for practicing new skills, but also lovely if you're thinking about designing something kind of custom made by you. Rather than following a pattern, you can kind of sit down and use this book and then decide exactly how you want something to look. I also have a copy of another book by the same author. Again, it's a Japanese knitting book. But this is the one I have here in Italy. These are just really, really gorgeous. My mum got me this one again for Christmas. You'll notice a pattern here in a lot of my favourite tools, all being from my mum. She is the best when it comes to supporting my crafting. But yeah, 10 out of 10 for this book. It's really, really awesome. There is not very much to it. It literally is pictures and charts, but if you are thinking, oh, I would like to make something really unusual or try a really complex kind of stitch pattern, this is the one for you. It's really fun. A lot of it is very almost Art Deco in my opinion. The appearance of the stitches, the kind of complexity of the patterns, it really is reminiscent of that to me, and it shows you sort of the limits of what you can achieve with mixing different techniques. As that was my last object to show you, I will round it up. I hope you really enjoyed seeing some of these tools. I thought that this would be a fun little video and a cool way to show you some of the things that I use, where I got them from, and also chat with you about some of the really affordable options that can improve your life as a knitter. If you found this useful, do give it a like, and I hope to see you again in my next video. Bye!